We're going to get into the next presentation, understanding the general permit for discharge of miscellaneous industrial users. Lisa Muscanell Depaola, nice Italian name, and I'm half Italian and I still can't pronounce it. She's with Write Pierce. Lisa is in Write Pierce's Connecticut Wastewater Practice Group. She joined Write Pierce in 2009. Previously interned multiple summers with the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection during her undergraduate studies. Lisa holds a bachelor's degree in environmental engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute and is a registered professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. She lives in Glastonbury with her husband Peter and her black cat PJ. So without further ado, I'll introduce Lisa. Come on up. Oh, there you are right there.
Before I start, I just wanted again to thank all of you for what you do on a daily basis, especially during the pandemic. You are essential, and thank you for all you did, especially during those lockdown days last March and April and May when we had a lot of unknowns and you still went to work, and a lot of you had staff that were still going in the dry pits and were in buildings with each other and had to go to report to different pump stations and everything else while I was safely working from home and not worrying. So thank you again for what you do day in and day out and being essential. All right, so today I would like to talk about the general permit for discharges from miscellaneous industrial users. And this session hopefully will be a very practical approach to understand this general permit so that you can implement and administer your program in a way that's sustainable and manageable and enforceable. And my hope today is that we'll just take the mystery out of this permit and to really steer you in the right direction and just break it down into something that you can actually understand. Okay, so brief presentation overview. These are a couple of things we'll cover today, just the difference between the new general permit and the old general permit. What is a miscellaneous industrial user? Who's not a miscellaneous industrial user? The different types of groups that we have. We have a group 1 and a group 2 MIU discharge. And then I'll talk a little bit about how you find out where your industrial users are. You're just taking an inventory of your users in the town or within your collection system. Updating sewer regulations, ordinances, or codes, a little bit about project administration, and hopefully we'll be pretty brief on the discharge notification form and all the attachments. So what is exactly miscellaneous industrial user wastewater? Miscellaneous industrial user wastewater is not subject, it's any wastewater that's not subject to federal categorical pretreatment standards. It can be conveyed by the sanitary sewer system or also transported by a licensed waste hauler. I do want to mention too that licensed waste haulers can only bring miscellaneous industrial user wastewater discharge to select treatment plants in the state. There are, I believe, 13 of them. So miscellaneous industrial wastewater does not include domestic sewage, and it also does not include groundwater remediation wastewater. Okay, so I touched upon what a miscellaneous industrial user is. There's many different acronyms and the alphabet soup, so aside from MIUs, I just wanted to point out what is a significant industrial user. So the significant industrial user is not permitted under this new permit that was issued by the state. The significant industrial users are permitted under their own separate special permit that is still administered and enforced by the DEP. So SIUs are industrial users that are subject to categorical pretreatment standards. And I think a lot of people, when they first were learning about this new permit that came out, they got a little nervous, like, oh, am I going to have to permit and enforce and manage and administer all my industrial users or the significant industrial users? And I say no, but with a caveat that because you hold a NIPDES permit, a lot of you hold the NIPDES permit, you are still responsible for knowing your industrial users, all your industrial users that are coming into your collection system and or your treatment plant. You just are not responsible for the permitting and the day-to-day administration of the SIU general permit. So there's a threshold. To be a significant industrial user, you will discharge a cumulative maximum of 25,000 gallons per day or more of processed wastewater to the treatment plant. Now that excludes domestic sewage. You can also be a significant industrial user if you contribute a processed waste stream which makes up 5% or more of the average dry weather hydraulic or organic capacity of the treatment plant. Or you can also be an SIU if the commissioner of the DEP or a local POTW authority says that you are going to be considered a significant industrial user. So today we're not talking about significant, we're talking about miscellaneous industrial users. I also wanted to just mention another definition. There's a definition used in the general permit between the POTW authority and the receiving POTW authority. So in many cases, like I'll take Trumbull for instance, Trumbull only has their collection system, so they'd be considered the POTW authority, but the receiving POTW authority for Trumbull's wastewater would be Bridgeport. So most of you probably are both a POTW authority and a receiving POTW authority. I also just wanted to mention interference and pass-through, and when you're under your NIPDES permit, you always should be aware of interference and pass-through, because if you have interference at your treatment plant or you have discharges that are going to just pass through your system and cause a violation of your NIPDES permit, then you have an issue. And so miscellaneous industrial users cannot cause interference or pass-through. But I did just want to take a moment and say that from a pre-treatment standpoint, your treatment plants never can have interference or pass-through. Okay, so the old general permit, there was an old general permit that was abbreviated MISC. So that was the general permit for miscellaneous discharge of sewer-compatible wastewater. It expired last fall, and the Connecticut DEP had the authority to administer and enforce that general permit. Now that's gone away, and we know that there was a new permit. There was also an old general permit under the state for vehicle maintenance wastewater, and that has been eliminated, and the requirements of that permit got folded into what we'll now call the MIUGP, the Miscellaneous Industrial Users General Permit. So these two permits now are obsolete, and they've been replaced with the Miscellaneous Industrial Users General Permit. So this permit went into effect on October 31st, 2020 in the fall, and it became effective on October 31st, and this newly issued permit requires local POTW authorities to regulate and enforce miscellaneous industrial users. It does expire currently on October 30th, 2025, so it looks like the DEP will be sending this out every 5 years. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that the miscellaneous industrial wastewater, there's group 1 and group 2. So group 1 is considered processed wastewater, and then group 2 is considered non-processed wastewater. So processed wastewater, in order to be covered under the miscellaneous industrial users permit, a miscellaneous industrial user could only discharge less than 25,000 gallons per day under group 1. So right now here you'll see these steel vats, and this is just representing that if you have a distillery or a brewery or a winery or there's one more, a cidery now, I guess that, cidery, okay. Those discharges that are coming from those facilities could be considered a miscellaneous industrial user under Group 1 process wastewater. Oh, I guess I'll also mention too, commercial laundry wastewater, just for a second. This is not talking about the laundromats. This is talking about like a big facility that takes in restaurant tablecloths and napkins and medical jammies and other things used at like a hospital, like a big massive facility. My clients so far, like I don't have any clients that have any commercial laundry wastewater discharges to their collection system, so they're not the laundromat facilities. Okay, so Group 2, non-process wastewater. I think the most common type of discharge under this category is vehicle maintenance wastewater, so your car washes, any auto body shops that do like engine wash downs, and also this category would include swimming pool wastewater. Now you might say, oh great, we have to permit swimming pool wastewater. Well, not necessarily. So I'll get to that. I'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so I've been talking a little bit about this, but again, just to reiterate, what is not considered miscellaneous wastewater? Miscellaneous industrial user wastewater, so it's not domestic sewage. If there's a discharge that's covered under a NIPDES or a SPEDES permit, it's not MIU wastewater. If there's wastewater that has a pre-treatment permit before it's discharged to the sewer system, those typically have like an abbreviation SP in the permit name. That's not miscellaneous industrial wastewater. I mentioned earlier, if you are a significant industrial user, you're not covered under the miscellaneous industrial general permit. If you have wastewater that discharges directly to a water body, you're not miscellaneous industrial user wastewater. So also, I did want to mention, I had talked to the DEP last summer, and because one of my clients had a bunch of dental offices, and they were asking me if dental discharges would be considered MIU wastewater, and I do have confirmation that that is not the case. So any dentists, any dental discharges are not going to be covered under this general permit. The Connecticut DEP already has a program that they administer, and they have said they will continue to do so. And I think it's obvious stormwater would not be considered a miscellaneous industrial user wastewater as long as it's not going to the sewer system. Okay. I wanted to talk just quickly about how you find your miscellaneous industrial users. I think a lot of people have had heartburn about this, and I just want to break it down for you. So the first step to find your miscellaneous industrial users and to start creating an inventory is the DEP does have a spreadsheet available on their website, and it's a starting point. It's not perfect, and they've admitted that too, that it's not perfect, but it is a starting point, and it at least gets the foot moving in the right direction. That list that they have on their website includes miscellaneous industrial users. It includes specifically permittees that were covered under GVM, that was the General Vehicle Maintenance Permit, which now has been moved into the MIU GP. And so that's the starting point. These are some other ways that you can help create your MIU inventory, and be patient with yourself. I think it's going to take some time, especially if you're from a larger city. Your collection system is pretty big. I think it's going to take some time. I would say rely on your institutional knowledge. If you know who your heavy hitters are, and this is a great time to go and pick up the phone, call people, go and visit, and interact with people and tell them, are you aware of the MIU GP? Oh, maybe you're going to be covered now under the significant industrial users, or to just engage in conversation with them. Also, those 13 select facilities in the state, you guys know that you have septage and sewage haulers coming in, and you should know if they're not bringing in what is considered domestic sewage. You should know, you should already have an inventory of who those facilities are, what types of discharge they're bringing in, and if they're considered miscellaneous industrial use or wastewater. I also want to mention that it would be helpful engaging with a lot of your city or town staff, like the planning and zoning department and your building inspectors. I think they'll be your best friend, providing you some lists and Excel spreadsheets so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Now, it's important, your friend, to be able to administer this program, your first step is to update your sewer regs, your ordinances, and your codes. So you need a vehicle to be able to administer properly this program, and in order to do that, you need to spend the time up front now to update your sewer regs or your ordinances or your codes. And this provides the opportunity for you to raise awareness and explain to the WPCA and the Sewer Commission and your staff this new responsibility, and it requires you to get buy-in from who you report to, and to know that you have some additional responsibility now on your plate. I know this makes everyone cringe, but I can tell you that so far we've been pretty successful with some of my clients. Just this week, we were able to get regulation modifications passed at a WPCA meeting, so it is happening. And maybe just a show of hands, has anybody successfully been able to change their modifications to incorporate the MIU-GP? Show of hands? Okay, so there's always room for improvement, so get that on your agenda for the next WPCA meeting and start to thinking about that. This also provides the opportunity for you. You might as well, if there's other sections that are updated and you're looking for a good opportunity, now's the time. Update some other sections, get it done now. You have one resolution that you can hopefully get approved by your sewer commission or your WPCA. The time is now. Do it now. Okay, so you might be asking, well, what are we going to do to regulate or to update the sewer regs and the ordinances and the codes? What do we need to do? Well, first off, the general permit issued by the DEP has a lot of good information, and you don't really need to reinvent a lot of the language. You can incorporate some of the language from the general permit, just like hopefully many of you already have done for the general permit with FOG. And actually, if you already have in your regulations the FOG program, you can utilize that organization as a go-by to insert language for the MIU-GP. You can decide on fees and violation fees. I've also had some clients that have decided to just leave the language general, saying that fees can be charged or at the discretion of the WPCA, and then the WPCA can always issue, like if you have your annual user fees worksheet that you pass and then you post on your website, you can always add something on that sheet and you can update it as you go. One of the important things that you'll want to make sure you update in your regulations is a lot of definitions. There's a lot of definitions that came into the general permit, and you should definitely make sure you add those into your regulations. Because people do read these regulations. People do, especially when they're looking to apply for a new connection. I think they're going to be digging into these regs, so definitely update your definitions. And then another important aspect is your pollutant effluent limit table. So hopefully many of you already have in your regulations, in your sewer code, concentrations and parameters that need to be met when you're discharging to the collection system. The MIU-GP specifically has effluent limits already listed, so you need to make sure that you are including in your modifications all the parameters that are included in the MIU-GP. Now, you may actually find that you have some parameters that are more stringent than the general permit issued by the state, and that is totally okay. So if you want to keep your more stringent limits, you can definitely do so. Okay, so this table 5.1 out of the general permit, these are the effluent limits that they include, and all these limits, all these parameters, all these pollutants should be included in your modifications to your regs. I have seen sometimes like BOD, COD, TSS, those are some of the parameters that are often more stringent in already in some of my clients' sewer regs. Okay, so a couple of bullet points about how to successfully administer your MIU program. First off, depending on the size of your collection system, you're going to have to dedicate some personnel and staffing. There's also plenty of consulting engineers out there that I'm sure would be more than happy to help you. Also, the next bullet point, you want to make sure you really start your inventory so that you know who is an MIU. And this is a great opportunity too to know who your significant industrial users are or your categorical industrial users are. And I'm going to tell you right now that that's important because when you register next time for your NIPDES permit every 5 years, the application was recently updated, and they're going to ask you more questions about your industrial users. So if you do it now, it's going to be less heartburn when you actually have to reapply for your NIPDES permit and you're scrambling to get everything else taken care of. So I'm giving you a little piece of advice, hopefully. A lot of people have asked if field inspections or field visits are necessary. So the DEP permit does not require local municipalities and the POTW authorities to actually go out and have a field inspection program. My advice is that if you have some industrial users that maybe are on the verge, or you've had issues with them in the past, maybe they've created some foaming issues from the car wash or something. I'm thinking of Ray Reaver. I remember we had an issue during construction in Manchester a couple years ago. Those are the places you might want to go make a visit, but it's not required. And then also I mentioned, the fees. A lot of people have been asking, should we charge? Well, under the old general permit, there was a fee to the state. A lot of people are unsure, and actually something I think that would be really helpful for this organization is to take a survey and to create a tracking spreadsheet of who's charging what fees for what attachments and what form and for what and how often, just because, out of fairness too, if you have a restaurant in one town and they're, I'm going to jump ship to the other, or the brewery, I'm going to jump ship to go to the other. I think it's good just to share information. And then lastly, just again, for a successful MIU program administration, it's a good opportunity to look at your sewer connection applications. So when you have a new applicant that wants to connect to the sewer, or maybe is repurposing a building and they're going to be adding flow and they have to go through your connection application process, you want to provide some checklists and some questions on those forms to catch your miscellaneous industrial users at that point. And you may want to add some attachments to your application that will mimic or be similar to what's in the general permit right now, which I'll talk about in a minute. So I took the opportunity, and I'm going to make this available to everyone after my talk. I took the opportunity to make a cheat sheet. I will leave it out on the table on your way out, and I made like 50 copies, but if you want more, or you'd like the PDF copy, you can definitely contact me, and I'd be more than happy to pass it along. After all, we're all here to help each other. So my goal was to put the general permit into, I think it's like 85 pages, something ridiculous. Who has time to read that, right? So this worksheet, this 2-page 11 by 17 placemat is hopefully a cheat sheet that you can use when you're on the phone with someone, or if you just want the 5-minute abbreviated version of what this permit is. And if you see anything wrong on this, or if you disagree with something, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to see if maybe I'm wrong, because it is very confusing, that permit, right? So instead of like going through this, I'm just going to say that instead of, I made this into a chart, like a flow chart, so that you can easily identify who needs what. There's, the general permit requires a discharge notification form for most miscellaneous industrial users. There's different attachments, A, B, C, D, and then there could even be more if you're, if you want to add more to the application process. I don't know why you would, but if you want to, you can. And it also lists out when notification is actually not necessary. And I want to bring that up because I think a lot of people got really nervous, like, oh my gosh, this is going to be such a hassle. But there are actually miscellaneous industrial users that are covered under the general permit that you don't need to notify you, and they don't need to fill out a form. So this flow sheet hopefully breaks that down. Okay, so the next couple of slides are just going over these discharge notification forms and the appendices. So again, my first bullet point is you may have miscellaneous industrial users that don't even need to complete this. So that's the first line of defense. Do you even, if someone calls you, what is up with this MIUGP? Well, let's see, do you even need to notify me? Do you even need to provide a discharge permit? Now, with that said, they may still need to follow all the regulations in the general permit. They can't just, send something down the drain in like a 5-gallon bucket of a chemical, but they don't need to provide you the paperwork. So we're on May 7th or 8th? I don't even know what day it is. COVID brain, right? But the date for submitting the discharge notification forms and all these other attachments was April 29th. 2021. Okay, so these slides are really just showing the flow chart. So I'm just going to skip these just because I'm talking a lot here. I do want to mention just really quickly about vehicle maintenance wastewater. So if you have car washes and auto body shops, if you have vehicle maintenance wastewater discharges, if they were already covered under the general vehicle maintenance permit, they just need to send you the discharge notification form in attachment A. So that should hopefully streamline some of this for you and for them. Okay, just because I am going over here. Okay, and then the second side of this flow chart, it also breaks down monitoring and reporting requirements. So group 2, non-processed wastewater, doesn't need to monitor, they don't need to report to you. I can kind of consider like the non-processed wastewater as those that you don't really need to worry too much about. The group 1 processed wastewaters, you're going to want to know what's going on. So there's different flow thresholds. If you have a flow that's less than 1,000 gallons per day, they don't need to monitor, and they don't need to provide you that information, unless, of course, you really want all this extra information. And then there's quarterly and monthly monitoring frequencies depending on different flow categories. And again, that's just for group 1. So far, a lot of my clients, honestly, have a couple of group 1 industrial users. I mean, obviously, if you're in a city, you may very well have more group 1. Okay, so I did just mention monitoring reports are definitely not required to be submitted to the POTW authority, but they should be available on request. And if you did go out to do like a field site visit, they should have them readily available for you when you go out there. Now, I do want to mention that monitoring requirements for processed wastewaters do not include food processing, so that would be like breweries and cideries, distilleries, commercial laundry, or reverse osmosis reject water discharges. There are some plans that are required, an O&M plan and a spill prevention plan for MIUs, other than vehicle maintenance wastewater discharges that require treatment prior to the discharge in order to meet your POTW authority limits and the pollutant parameters on Table 5.2 of the general permit. These plans don't need to be provided to you and to the POTW authorities unless, of course, you want to receive them. Okay, so I just want to wrap up really quickly of what I talked about today. Your first line of defense of properly administering this new MIU general permit is to update your sewer ordinances, codes, and regulations, get buy-in from the WPCA and the Sewer Commission. It gives you some teeth that you can stick into, and when people are calling you and they are asking questions, you can refer them to your regulations. You also want to talk about your fees internally and maybe externally, in the larger community. What's everyone doing? Another thing that I do recommend that you take the time to do right now is to update your sewer connection application. We mentioned that you may want to add some additional questions just so that you can catch your miscellaneous industrial users already when they're working on their application. We mentioned you taking an inventory of your industrial users. And lastly, I mentioned this, but your NIPD's permit application, if you do some legwork now and you understand who your industrial users are, your heavy hitters, your significant industrial users, your miscellaneous industrial users, it's going to make your NIPD's permit application next time around easier. And also, it's going to give you a better awareness of what is coming to your plan or what's in your collection system. And with that, I will open it up for questions. And I'm going to be more than happy to leave a copy of this flow chart at the door. And I'll be out there if you want to talk to me specifically. But I'll open up the floor now for any questions. Yes? Okay, so Art's first question was, if you have a group 1 process wastewater with flow that's over 25,000 gallons per day, does that automatically put that industrial user out of the MIU GP? So yes, they would be considered a significant industrial user. So if you, again, at group 1 process wastewaters over 25,000 gallons per day is considered a significant industrial user. And that is covered under the SIU general permit that is currently administered and enforced by the DEP. And Art, your second question? So Art's second question was, when is the appropriate time for industrial users to submit a fee if they're going to be required to do so? And yes, I would say it would be at the time of application. When they submit the discharge notification form and the attachments, I would say that would be the appropriate time. I understand that a lot of you already, and my clients too, a lot of them have already started receiving discharge notification forms and they haven't picked up a payment yet. That's going to be interesting. I'm sure it's going to be hard to track down people, but yeah, I don't know what to say about that. You could always go track them down, I suppose. If you have something in your regulations, if you change your regulations and you have a fee in there, but I would say when you get your discharge notification form and your attachments, you should get it then. Any other questions? Okay, so this gentleman had a question about, if you don't have a treatment plant in your town, are you required to administer this program, and do you need to be concerned with this general permit? So at the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that there's receiving POTW authorities and there's POTW authorities. So if there's a restaurant, or I'm sorry, that's a bad example. If you have a cidery in town X that's discharging to a collection system and the water gets transported to a town that has a treatment plant, that industrial user, if they're covered under the MIUGP, is technically required to notify both the receiving POTW and the other POTW authorities. So they would be notifying both the collection system town and the town that has the treatment plant facility. Does that answer your question, sir? Oh. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.